Welcome everybody out there in Radio Land. Welcome to OLC 4.0. This is Term 1A. We are on Class 9. Today we are looking at assignment number 12, Part B. Yesterday we looked at Part A. We're also going to be continuing our work on prepositions. If you've been listening to the radio for a while and you're feeling a little confused, I was taping for tomorrow earlier. There's no way to tape it without it going out. So this is the next assignment in our class, okay? Contact information page, as always, send your work to studentwork@nnec.on.ca. Please always include your full name, the course name, the assignment number, and your name on every assignment. Also, please label if it is the rough or the good draft of a writing assignment. And just a quick reminder, hand in both drafts if it asks for it. Basically, most times, if people forget to hand in one of those drafts, automatically you're failing the assignment because you've lost about half the marks. It really is worth your while to hand in both drafts. If you want to talk to me about an assignment we're doing today while I'm in the studio, the number here is 1-800-465-7144. If you want to fax in your work, 1-800-463-7852. And if you have a question you want to talk to me about privately, email me at jillian.percy@nnec.on.ca. You can also Facebook me, capital G, capital P, ERCY, space, capital W, AHSA. Keep in mind, I'm not on there super late in the day. I'm an early to bed person, so if you message me at midnight, I might not see it till the next day, okay? If you are looking for recordings on previous assignments, go to YouTube. I have a channel there, capital G, capital P, ERCY, space, capital W, AHSA. And all the recordings that have been done so far this term, which this is class 9. Yeah, class 9? Yeah, I think so. Will be there. If you are ahead of where we are only on assignment 12, then take a look at term 2A or term 2B, and they should have the assignments that you want to hear about, okay? A quick reminder, here is how my YouTube channel looks. It's pretty simple. Don't look at the home tab, but if you go to the playlist tab, all the classes for this term are right here in this playlist. I do have some playlists for other classes, like last year I did English 4E. If you happen to be, signed up for English 4E as well, I've got a few students who are doing that, then that's where you could check out last year's until I do the new class this year, okay? So that's kind of where you'd find things. Let's see. Oh, I did not get a chance to change this. My apologies. Okay, so our work today, or our learning goals, we are going to be identifying prepositions and prepositional phrases, understanding when to use a comma with a prepositional or adverb phrase, the difference between a summary and a news article. This is a huge one. Thinking about the audience for this article and what information they want to know about, understanding and applying the writing process stages, especially pre-planning and drafting. Part A of this assignment was the pre-planning. We want to apply the news article format to our own writing, locate images that illustrate the concept of a news story, learn how to create an interesting headline, understand and apply paragraphing in a news article, and learn how to use quotation marks in our writing and how it affects paragraphing. So it's kind of a big order for what we're doing today. So first, we're just kind of doing a quick review of prepositions. In general, a preposition is a word or several words that connect a noun or a pronoun to the rest of the main sentence, okay? It might show different types of relationships. It might show you time relationships, like at, in, on, or during. It might show place or location relationships, like at, in, or on. It might show direction, like through or towards. Agency, in other words, who did it, by or with. Measurement, things like of, about, or between. Source or origin, from or of will show that. Manners like how is it done, with, by, like, as. Purpose, like what's the reason, due to, because of, thanks to. And then possession or ownership, like who does it belong to, or if that person belongs to something, to, of, with, and for. Now, a lot of those you can see, they cover more than one type of relationship, right? Like with shows up multiple times. But you should be able to tell the difference by the meaning of the sentence. It's not super important, but there are a lot of prepositions and they're such small words, but they can really change meaning. So you do want to be cautious. Sometimes when you're using the wrong preposition, it can really alter what you were trying to say and make it tricky to understand. Okay. I'm not going to go into all of these. These are some of the prepositions of direction. I got to admit, when I'm thinking about prepositions, these are normally the type of prepositions I would first think of. Prepositions of direction, talking about above, across, along, among, around, at, behind, below, beside, close to, over, through, toward. There are little examples here. You can always come back and look at them later. And then things like up, down, between, by, inside or in, near, next to, on, onto, off, past, or under. Now, this is what we're talking about. Some prepositions are trickier than others. Like, it's not always logical. It's not logical to say that you're on a bus or a train or a plane, because technically on would suggest that there's the vehicle and you're standing on top of it. But that's not actually what we're doing, really. We're actually inside the bus or in the train or in the plane. But for some reason, we don't say it that way. Sometimes they call that kind of like a colloquial sort of phraseology. So especially if you're translating from one language to another, if you're thinking, that doesn't quite make sense, you're right. Sometimes it won't quite make sense. There just becomes kind of a way everybody gets used to talking about it, and then it sounds a little bit odd if we don't talk about it the same way. Let's see. Okay. I don't know if I feel like we did this the other day, but maybe we didn't. I saw the man run what way? Towards the woman. Could he run away from the woman? Yeah, that would make sense. It would depend on the meaning of the sentence. Could he run through her? Well, no, because that would imply that he somehow, like, I don't know, became an arrow and went right through her body or something. It doesn't really make sense, right? He tried to grab her, but she danced by him. That could be true. Away from him seems more likely because she's trying to get away from him. Towards him. Probably not, because why would you go towards somebody who's trying to grab you? The kitten jumped into the laundry basket. Now, if you had a laundry basket with a lid, you could say onto. But because it's like a box, into is what makes the most sense. The little boy climbed something, the ladder. It could be up, it could be down. It wouldn't be across, right? Across gives the idea of moving horizontally, not moving vertically. And that wouldn't make sense for a ladder unless the ladder was, I don't know, lying down on the ground or something. The key dropped down the steps. You probably wouldn't say towards the steps unless you were like, I don't know, on a hill and somehow they dropped close by. But if you were actually on the steps, you'd be like down the steps, and probably not into the steps unless you had some very strange steps that you climbed into. I think I'm going to drive to the park. Now, you could use into if it was like one of those big parks where you're driving like a trail through it. Like there's a zoo near my house back home where you drive into the park and stop and look at the animals, right? But up wouldn't really work. The little girls began to skip along the path to the woods. Along implies that they're following the path. They're not going across it. They're not under it. Among doesn't make any sense. Among would imply one person surrounded by a group of people. So a lot of these prepositions have a very specific meaning. So if you're not sure if you're using the right one, look it up in the dictionary so you're sure that you're getting across what you're trying to get across. It took all day to hike out of the canyon. Yeah, I couldn't hike with the canyon. That would imply the canyon was coming with me. I probably couldn't hike over a canyon because a canyon's like a big hole in the ground, right? Again, unless there's some sort of bridge or whatever that I'm crossing over. So you got to be mindful of what exactly it means. Prepositions of manner. This is where we talk about how something gets done. She writes with a pen. They came by car. He plays soccer like a professional. The children listened in silence. The book was written as a collaboration. This kind of preposition shows something about the manner in which an action was performed, whether it's with a tool or a particular way, or whether it's being compared to something else. My apologies, my voice is a little bit grindy today. And I think this is the last type we talk about today, is cause and effect. I don't normally think of these as prepositions, but they can be. Sometimes they'll start a whole new sentence, and then it goes back to conjunctions. You can see there's a little bit of overlap. But some of these, it's not creating a whole new sentence by using them, right? If I say they couldn't play because of the rain isn't a whole sentence that could stand on its own. So it makes sense now to consider it a preposition, right? The school is closed due to snow. We won the game thanks to her excellent performance. Many people suffer from allergies. He failed as a result of not studying. He managed to succeed out of sheer determination. That's one of those ones that doesn't quite make sense. How is it out of? I don't know. It's just one of those colloquial ones that we get kind of used to, right? But in each case, whether it's one word or two words or four words, it's still acting as like a preposition or a prepositional phrase, okay? And I think we're going to skip over that. I want to make sure we cover all of assignment 12 today. I am going to come back to this. This is what you would first see in your unit. And it's kind of a leftover from the previous version. This is kind of talking to you about all the important things that you would see in a news report. I would definitely want to read this over, and I would usually check it before I went on to the next assignment to make sure I had all these things. If you're answering no to all of these, then it means that you haven't really done the assignment properly, and you would need to fix it in order to pass the assignment. Okay, so part A, we're looking at brainstorming, or what's sometimes called pre-writing. And this part all by itself is worth 16 marks, okay? Not writing the essay, just thinking about it, okay? First of all, choose a topic for the news report. It has to be an event in chapter 1, not any of the other chapters, not any other book, just chapter 1 of Jimmy Comes Home, okay? So you're gonna tell me some sort of event, and what one are you gonna use? There's a few things people use in chapter 1, probably 2 or 3 main things people use. Which one are you picking, okay? And then remember how we've talked about all news stories have answers to the 5 W's and the H, so we're putting them right here. We want to make sure that you have these. These don't need to be a full sentence, but I would try to make sure it's more than one word. Give yourself a few more details so you can make some good sentences, okay? Who is in the event that you're talking about? Probably more than one person, but it might be about one main person. What is going on? What is the main thing that's happening? Where is it occurring? When is it happening? Remember that the when of your story isn't necessarily the same as the day that you write or publish it. It might have happened a week ago, a year ago, who knows? Why? Why is this event happening? What's the purpose for it? What occurred? And then how? What are the steps? What manner is it happening in? Make sure you have all those figured out before you go any further. Then think about the headline for your topic. What would be an eye-catching but truthful headline that would make people want to read your story? Okay. And then number 4, news reports often have photos to visually show the event being reported on. Draw a picture or locate a photo or another graphic in a magazine or newspaper that would appear with your news report. I am super flexible about this, people. I have had people do me wonderful little drawings. I've had stick figure drawings. I've had photos people have downloaded from the internet. I've had photos people took themselves, photos they've cut out of the newspaper and glued on their page. Whatever works for you and is relevant to the story, right? I should look at your picture and go, oh yeah, I know why they've picked that. Okay. Then the last little bit is quotations. Okay, here we're looking at, I think we did talk about this the other day, is sometimes I've had people, there was a line in last year's assignment where it said something like, if you need to make some stuff up, go ahead. And how people took that was they didn't have to use anything from the novel. They made up names, made up people, made up events. That wasn't what that was trying to say. It was talking about this issue of, in chapter 1 of our novel, there really isn't a lot of talking. There's kind of a few brief words, and not all of those words are interesting enough that you would really write them in a news story. So you may need to make up some quotes, but you would want to try and use actual people that are actually occurring in that book. Okay, don't change their names, don't change their occupations, don't add a completely unknown event that never happened in our book, okay? So for example, it's a reservation, so they would have a band council, they would have a chief. You might have one of them give us a quote on how they feel about an event that actually happened. That's fine. We know they exist. They aren't really ever named in the story, so it's fine for you to give them your own names, okay? But the majority of the details in your news article should really match the actual events told in the novel, okay? You just may need to add some small details. Okay, sorry. There's a few of these things that didn't quite print over properly. Okay, once you've got all that done and you're happy with it, like you look at it and think, yeah, I could write a story from that. If you don't feel that way, I would go back, especially to this part, and add some more details, okay? Once you've got that, then you want to start to think about how you're going to write the rough draft of your news report. It needs to be one whole page, okay? Sometimes people are handing me in just like a few sentences, and I just can't give you very many marks for that when someone else has written like an entire page worth of a story, okay? But your big idea right now is trying to make sure you're using the format of a news story, which is that inverted pyramid structure we talked about yesterday. You want to make sure all the elements are present, right? The entire story should be summarized in the lead paragraph, which should only be a sentence or two. Then in the next sections, you explain the important details. You might put quotes here. You kind of like build up this part, right? If you're thinking of a hamburger, this is the meaty bit with all the good stuff on it, right? Refer to the checklist you've seen earlier to make sure everything is in order. And then send me this copy once it's finished before you make any revisions on this copy so that I am able to read it and make suggestions for the next assignment. I'm just going to check something really quick. Yep, okay, I do have. Sorry, I suddenly blanked out. I've been reading these things so much that sometimes I feel like I've already said it, but it's just I've said this particular part before, sorry. Okay, so we are going to look at, here's where we're going to look at this news report. Is the headline short and does it catch the reader's attention? Is a date included in the report? Normally it's right at the very beginning, okay? That isn't the same thing as telling me when your event occurred. This part is when it got published in the paper or when you wrote it, right? An appropriate who. Many news stories will have more than one person acting. If that is the case for your event, make sure you list those people here. Make sure you've listed the what, when, where, why, that it's correct, and that it makes sense. How? How did the event happen? What are the steps? What are the manner it occurred? This should really demonstrate that you understand the event. The quotes you've used are thoughtful and appropriate. I've occasionally had people use quotes like, so-and-so said hello. I mean, it is a quote, but that doesn't really add anything to the news story. So you wouldn't really use a quote just to like, oh, there we go, I used a quote. It should present somebody's opinion or point of view or give some sort of important information. It shouldn't just be a quote to make a quote, okay? The level of detail should demonstrate considerable understanding of the event. So when I read this, I should think, wow, they really understood what happened. They really got it. If I'm reading your news report and I'm not even sure if we read the same book, there's a problem. Okay. So make sure you are reading that first chapter really closely before you write this assignment. Now, the next one is that the report is written in the third person point of view. I didn't really talk about this a lot last year till the end, but you don't want to write this as a journal. You're not saying I saw this or I think this or we think this, because it's supposed to be a news article. And you can quote people talking about their feelings and their thoughts, but you cannot report feelings as if you could see inside their head. And I'm gonna like kind of go out on a limb here, and like Jimmy is talked about a lot. And in the novel, they tell us his feelings. He feels this, he's thinking this, he's wondering about this. You can't use those in your news report unless you are pretending that Jimmy talked to you and said those words out loud. Like you interviewed him and he said, yeah, I was feeling kind of nervous. That's okay. But then you would say it that way. You'd say, Jimmy said, and you'd use your quotations and you'd give the statement. You can't just say, like, I could tell or Jimmy felt. It has to be done as a news report. And news reporters don't talk about their own feelings, or they're not supposed to, anyways. Okay. Sorry, again, a few things didn't transfer over properly. Here we go. This is the main rubric for the news report. And I believe I more or less use the same one for assignment 12 and assignment 13, but check in your unit, okay? If it's different, it'll be a different one there. These are the main things I'm looking at when I'm marking. First of all, your knowledge and understanding of the event. So in other words, when I'm reading this part, I'm looking for, yeah, you understood the chapter really well, okay? If it's great, it's super thorough, then you're looking at the A level. If it's pretty thorough, then you're looking at the B level. If you're showing some knowledge, but there's some pretty important things that seem to be missing, then you're looking at a C level. And if you're just seeming to skim the surface and it looks like, oh, I'm not sure they really understood, then you're looking at a D or maybe even less if it doesn't sound about like even the same novel. Thinking and inquiry. Here's where I'm looking at how did you write your lead? What details did you select? What kind of quotes did you create? Right? I'm looking at your thinking skills here. And again, it's the same thing. Excellent skills is A, considerable skills is B, some is C, and limited is D. And then your communication. This is more like your writing style, your sentences, your paragraphs, the grammar you use, limited use, some use, considerable, or thorough use. And then application. This is like, how did you apply the conventions of a news article? Does it read like a news report? Okay. If you wrote a journal instead, then you're either going to get like a D or less than a D. If it sounds so amazing that it sounds like a real news reporter write it, then you're looking at an A. So in order to do that, you're going to have these elements, right? You need your headline, you need your date, you need to have the 5 W's and the H. You should have your inverted triangle format. Your point of view should be the third person, and you should have your objective tone and your quotes. All of those things are what I'm looking at in order to get an A on this report, okay? Where are we with time? Okay. Sorry, I feel like I've been talking quite a lot today. Okay, this is the original version, so I'm including this just so you can see it, okay? It's very similar to the brainstorming part that we did yesterday, and it kind of talks about the same thing. If you are handing this into me, that is fine, but it isn't what we're doing currently. And this is kind of the leftover part. And the reason is just because I just found people didn't quite seem to get it. And so they were losing marks because the assignment didn't explain things well. Okay, that's really the idea. Okay. So this is the big thing. News stories are supposed to be objective. That means they're supposed to report the facts only in a fair and balanced way. They should not be discussing their personal opinions or their personal feelings. They also should not be allowing how they feel about the issue influence how they write the story. Now, this is tricky, right? Sometimes reporters, they're human beings, right? They may have really strong feelings about a topic. So sometimes reporters might let their bias or their feelings influence them by only quoting people who agree with their opinion. That's something we've been talking about a little bit in the last few assignments, right? It's one of the writing prompts from, I think, assignment 8 or assignment 9. Sometimes writers or even reporters may let their conscious or their unconscious bias influence their choice of quotes or their vocabulary. So one really common example would be rebels versus freedom fighters. Okay. So often if you are reading a news story, if the reporter is calling them rebels, it's because they disagree with them. Whereas if they're calling them freedom fighters, it's often because they agree with them. Now, sometimes it might be the actual like name of the group. Maybe they're calling themselves the Eagle Rebels or, you know, the Mustang Freedom Fighters, in which case it doesn't really affect things. But that's the kind of thing where they may still be reporting all the events truthfully, but their opinion is coming through in the words that they're choosing. So you do want to be mindful of that. Sometimes I've seen people use words like this criminal or this tragedy or this horrible person. And it's like, you know, we talk that way kind of casually when we're talking to friends, but a newspaper reporter is not supposed to talk that way. And if they did, they have editors, and the editors would usually go in and either take it out or, you know, put a little underline and say, hey, you need to take this out because this is not objective. That's a huge issue. Tone is a very important part of news articles. This kind of goes with objectivity, but it isn't the only part. Tone is also about, you want to write formally, right? Remember we've talked about you don't want to sound casual, like you're just talking to your friend. It should be serious. Even when reporters are talking about like a funny, silly event like Blueberry Fest or Dryden Fair, they still generally talk about it in a somewhat serious academic kind of manner. You're not going to use short forms because, again, your readers might not recognize them. You're not going to use slang, and you're not going to use like swearing or cuss words because that might offend some of your readers. Remember, a newspaper reporter is getting paid to write, so they want to please as many people as possible. They're not going to deliberately annoy their readers because then they might complain or stop reading the paper or all those kind of things. So you really want to get the tone correct for your news story. It's a huge part of this. So here's an example of an appropriate tone versus an inappropriate tone. Both of them are talking about the same event. So the first one, I took an actual article from the Sioux Bulletin. It's from February 15th, and here is how it sounds. I'm going to grab a quick drink before I do that. Okay, we got it. A tradition of caring is continuing in Sioux Lookout this month with the Sioux Lookout Minoyuin Health Center Foundation's 25th Tree of Hearts campaign. Through the campaign, people are invited to illuminate a light in memory or in honor of someone special for $10 each. Proceeds will go to SLMHC Foundation in support of the MRI campaign. Lights are on sale now and will continue to be sold throughout the month of February. Lights will be lit on February 14th. Trees will be located at Centennial Park, William A. Bill George Extended Care, and the courtyard area at SLMHC. Trees are being sponsored by the municipality of Sioux Lookout and SLMHC. So that's an appropriate tone. It's serious, it's formal. They've used academic language. It's in third person. And they're not really expressing their opinion. The only thing you might get for opinion is a tradition of caring is continuing. It's a tiny little bit of opinion there. Okay, inappropriate tone. I was so happy to hear that they're going to have the Tree of Hearts campaign back again at the hospital. It is my fave, LOL. So guys, this is a really great cause. Please come out and get a light to remember your loved ones. The money goes to help us get an MRI, which we totally need, right? Now, that is an inappropriate tone. It's all true, but I sound silly rather than serious. I'm using short forms like fave or LOL. I'm using I language rather than he, she. I'm talking about my feelings and my opinions. And because of all that, I'm also not really giving you a lot of information, right? So your tone can also affect your information. So you want to sound serious, like a reporter, like a great reporter. Okay. So one thing to think about when you're writing is, if you were really writing a story about chapter one, like if that had happened in your community, what happened in chapter one, who would be wanting to read about it? Like if this was going into the Sioux Bulletin or Wawate News, what would be important to those people? What would they want to know about the event? Like if somebody had actually gotten in trouble for setting a fire and was returning to your hometown, what would people be thinking about? What would you feel? What would the older people feel? Would they have a different viewpoint than some of the youth, right? How might the police feel or the nurses? Who would actually be reading this article? What might they be wondering about and what would they be feeling? Because even though the reporter isn't going to answer those questions directly, they would be thinking about that as they wrote so that they answer everybody's questions without people trying to like send them letters and call them up and asking for more information, right? Where do they live? What age are they? What gender are they? Now, gender isn't always an issue, but I'm putting that there. It can be an issue for some stories. Is economic status an issue? Again, if you're talking about tax cuts, that might be an issue for some people. If you're talking about a new business proposal, that might be an issue for some people and not for others. What do they care about? What matters to them? How do you think they feel about Jimmy coming back? Not how Jimmy feels and not how you feel, but your audience, your readers. The next one is a big one. What would a reporter know or ask? Thinking about this is like, what access to information does the reporter have? They're not God. They're not going to know everything that happened in chapter one unless they talked to a specific person and that person told them. So the reporter isn't sitting on the plane. So he's not going to know what Frank and Jimmy talked to each other about on the plane unless one of them told the reporter afterwards. The reporter might have access to police reports. He might have access to the original news stories about the fire. He or she might have interviewed different people around the community, the chief, the police, grandma, friends, the principal. What would those people say about Jimmy coming home? Would they all have the same opinion? Remember that you're allowed to make up the quotes if you want. You don't want to have too many quotes, but it would be a good idea to list at least 2 quotes from different opinions, maybe 3, but you probably don't want much more than that, okay? Creating the headline. This, I think we did talk about a little bit yesterday. And I'm not going to go over it again. The big thing is it should be eye-catching, but it should be truthful, right? You don't want to make it sound like it's a lie, but you should make it interesting enough that people want to read it, okay? Again, as you're writing, your 5 W's all get told in the lead. I feel like this is probably the trickiest part to write because it's so different than how we normally write. Normally we write or a lot of times we write in a chronological order. Here's the first thing, here's the next thing, here's the third thing. Here, we want to say everything really important all at once, and then we go back and we flesh in the details. Okay. And then at the very end are things that might be kind of interesting. It's a detail, but if it got left out of the story, people would still understand what was going on. Okay. Possible events. Yep, we've talked about this already, I believe. So there's a little bit of crossover. Okay. We've talked about this a little bit, but summary is that paragraph format, your topic sentence, your details, and then a closing sentence. That's not how we do a news article. News article has a headline, then the lead paragraph, then important details, then less important details. Summary always lists events in the order they occurred. A news article lists events in terms of importance. A summary, quotations are just an example of the dialogue, and it might show relationships between people. A news article is usually used to show different people's experiences or opinions, or I'm going to add here, or to add important information. Sorry. In a summary, all the concepts are usually summarized equally. You might give more importance to the main ideas, but examples and details might get omitted, right? They aren't really that important. But for a news article, priority is usually given to public safety or public rights over any type of individual experience. So some details might get included if they're important to public safety, or they might get excluded if it's important for public rights or for the law. So it's a little different criteria. So this is the biggest problem I have with assignment. A lot of people will hand me in a summary, okay? So we just talked about the summary characteristics, and here is an example of a summary. Jimmy panicked when he thought he was going to get searched for drugs or alcohol when he got to Green Star Lake. His parole officer had to calm him down. Jimmy ran into his old friends and talked to them for a bit. Then he ran into some kids who asked him if he was going to burn anything down. Jimmy remembered breaking into the band office and starting a fire. Jimmy's grandma said, "I am so glad to see you." Now, why does this count as a summary rather than a news article? It's following the sequence of the chapter chronologically rather than using importance. It's discussing his thoughts, it's discussing his feelings, and it's talking about things that only he could have seen or heard. Like Jimmy remembered, the reporter wouldn't know what Jimmy remembers, right? Now, in a news article, here's how a news article might sound. The pilot reported that his passenger Jimmy did not initially want to get off the plane once he noticed the cops. As part of the new security protocols that Chief and Counsel have put in place to fight drug and alcohol sales, the police meet every plane and search their bags. Parole officer Frank Jensen confirmed the pilot's statement and said, "Returning to community after time in detention is very challenging for youth. They are never sure if people are going to give them a clean slate or not." Okay, so here I'm talking about important information, but I'm only talking about people's feelings when they say it, right? I often will tell you who the information is from. This is from the patrol officer, Frank Jensen. The chief and counsel are telling him about the security protocols. The pilot is telling him about Jimmy, right? If reporters don't want to sound like they just kind of magically know stuff, they want to make sure it sounds like, hey, we verified this, it's coming from a reliable source. Reporters only use quotes that will make the story more interesting. They're not just saying hello or we love him. Here we've got Mr. Baker saying we're happy to have Jimmy back at school, but that's because they're trying to discuss the issue of he's gonna have to go back to school, and they're making it clear that the principal's okay with that, right? Yep, we've talked about that already. Okay, point of view. Every piece of writing is written from a certain point of view. It's not always the writer's own voice or point of view. There's basically 4 main points of view in writing: first person point of view, second person point of view, third person point of view, but limited, and then third person point of view, omniscient. So first person point of view is when we talk about I or we. I saw the vehicle go down the street and hit the little boy. I was worried that the boy might be hurt. When I saw him, the boy started crying. I asked him, "What is your name?" But he didn't answer me. That is first person. We don't use that as a reporter. Second person. Second person is kind of funny. You use this a lot in ads. They'll say, it's almost like a friend is talking to you, like, you could be successful if only you used this deodorant. But we don't usually use it in summaries, and we definitely don't use it in news stories. You see the vehicle go down the street and hit the little boy. You cross the road and walk towards the little boy. When you see him, right? It's all you. It doesn't make any sense in the context of a report. Okay, this is the one that is typically used. It's third person. We use he or she. Limited version is sticking to the viewpoint of one particular character. They describe things they say or do. They're not going to describe feelings or opinions because they can't read people's minds. She saw the vehicle go down the street and hit the little boy. She crossed the road and walked towards the little boy. When she saw him, the boy started crying. Okay. Then the next one, this is really common in novels. Okay. And that is sometimes confusing for students because they'll want to use this one because they're used to seeing it a lot, but it's not one we use in news reports. And in this one, novelists will sometimes write like they're God, by which I mean they can read the person's thoughts, they read their mind, they know their feelings, and they talk about them. So here it might be, she saw the vehicle go down the street and hit the little boy. The little boy felt scared and shaken. She crossed the road and walked towards the little boy. She was worried about him. So here, the person is describing everybody's thoughts and feelings because they're using this omniscient, like all-powerful point of view. We don't use that for reporting either, okay? So, let's see here. Tone, we've talked about. Yep, talked about that. Paragraph 1 is the lead. This is the very biggest thing. Tackle this one first. If you get this part right, it makes the rest of the article flow really well. Then you're talking about the most important details. Newspaper paragraphs are not very long. If you see a physical newspaper rather than on like a screen, they're written in really narrow columns, and people don't enjoy reading a long column of text with no break. So 2 to 3, maybe 4 or 5 sentences per paragraph are pretty typical. And generally when you switch paragraphs, you're switching the focus of the writing to a new topic. Remember to always leave a line between the paragraphs. Now, this is old school print papers. Online, I've often seen recently, I don't like it, but it's what's there, is there's a space between every single sentence because people are reading things on their phone so much. And so it can be really hard to understand if they don't. But that's not typical or usual. And I would rather you avoided that style of writing if you could for right now, okay? And the very least details are going at the end. This is the part that if somebody like chopped up the last part of your story, it wouldn't matter. You would still understand everything that's going on. Okay, quotations. I want to talk about quotations just a little bit because we really haven't tackled them. A quotation almost always has what's called a tag. And the tag explains who is talking and how they're saying it. Okay, newspapers generally use, I'm going to say they actually really only use said. I would not use the rest of these. I do feel like I see them sometimes explained, replied, responded, declared, and unannounced, but I'm gonna take them out. Okay. The mayor said, "We welcome new businesses to town and want to make investing here easier for them." So the tag part is the mayor, which is telling you who, and said, which is telling you how they talk. And then you put the comma. Then you start your quotations where his actual words begin. You say all his words, and then you put a period and put end quotes to show where it ends. Usually the beginning quotes look like a 66 and the end quotes look like a 99, okay? When the quotation or his exact words come last, we put the period inside the quotation marks. This would be true if they had a question mark or an exclamation point in most cases. I don't need to put another period there, okay? That one period kind of does double duty for the end of him talking and the end of the entire sentence. Now, quotations where the tag is last. Sometimes they start with the exact words and then they explain who's talking. I'm obviously disappointed in the outcome, but hope they find what they're looking for with an OPP contract. Comma, apostrophe, said Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkins, who chairs the police board. So we're still using those beginning and ending quotes, still starts with 66, still ends with 99. If you would normally put a period here, we don't, because it looks like this whole sentence is over and it's not yet. We change it to a comma, right? Then we'd say the tag and then we would put the period, okay? Having said that, if it was a question mark or an exclamation point, we probably would still leave it to make sure it shows the emotion that he was feeling. Anytime you quote a new person, you leave a space. Up top, Constable John Smith is talking. Down below, one of the team players is talking. We leave a space in between so people understand it's the new person. If we just did this, like if I just ran it together like that, people would generally think that it's still Constable John Smith talking, and that would make them feel confused. So we leave that space to make sure they're not confused. Every now and again, newspaper articles will do indirect quotes. A lot of times, like I said, reporters will try and give the source of their information, unless it's confidential. But not everything that's said to them is in a short, catchy quote. The person might have been very long-winded, and so the reporters might summarize it. They might make it much shorter by using an indirect quote, like, the hospital reported that the patient had only minor injuries and is doing fine. That might not be the exact words the hospital said, but it's getting across the main idea. The police have informed us that the suspect they are looking for is a white male, early 20s, long brown hair with a tattoo of a spider on his neck. That is kind of prefacing, here are the words they told us. Okay, it's kind of like a little clue there. But it's also a clue that that's not their exact words. Okay. Yep. So thinking about the quotes, sometimes you might want to use quotes that are very negative, like they're upset about the event or they're against the event. But you might also want to use quotes that are positive. Let me see if I have that next. I'm hoping I do. Oh, no. All right, some of this is going to last year's. We would still use this. Here's a copy of the graphic I used. I liked this one because you can't really see the person's face. So no matter how you're picturing Jimmy, it still works. I also think, I remember the t-shirt had something interesting on it that I thought really worked. Hang on a second. Oh, the original folks. I thought that was something that a First Nations boy might wear. So I kind of liked that too. So I would use that. It's part of your story. Okay. Yep. Oh, these are the positive ones, right? The chief saying, we're always happy to have the youth return. The probation officer talks about, kind of giving people a second chance, that whole idea. So we're almost done our time. Yep, we did that. Okay. So here's kind of a sample rough draft. This is too short. I'm just going to point that out. This needs a lot more information. It would not be okay. Pay attention to the spaces, pay attention to how we did the quotes. And then, let me see. Yeah. So this assignment, it's actually, I believe, worth more than 27 marks at this point. Part A was worth 16 marks. Hang on a sec. I'm sorry, because of changing things, I kind of forget. That's part A. All right. And then part B. Okay. not quite seeing it here. I'm sure it is here. If not, check your unit and it should tell you. If you have any questions about this assignment, feel free to call me. If you have already worked on this assignment and you're using last year's original assignment, that is fine. I will still mark it. I don't worry about that. But if you happen to have last year's unit and you wish you had this year's unit, please contact me. I would be so happy to give you the current unit, okay? Yeah, we'll talk about that already. Okay, so we're good. Thank you so much. And then tomorrow you can listen to the next part of the assignment.